when we are born human, it's like we are given a white card that as a human being, through our actions in this life, we have the ability to become literally anything in the world. Through our actions in this life, we can turn ourselves into a serial killer, or we can turn ourselves into a Buddha. We can, through our actions, send ourselves to the lowest hell or the highest of heavens. We can become any creature, any ghost, any spirit, anything in the world we can become through our actions and through how we train ourselves in this life. Particularly as a human being, we have this ability to change our nature, to change what we are completely. This is why birth as a human being is so sought after, and all the human beings want to go to heaven, but everybody who's in heaven, if they have any sense at all, wants to be born human. This rare and precious birth, this precious opportunity to practice, to go higher, to go out ideally even of this system of samsara. Even more rare then is the opportunity to hear the teachings of a Buddha, the opportunity to practice them. But when we're born then as a human being, we forget where we've come from, we forget if we've ever wished to be born as a human in the past, we forget that. And instead we spend our life just looking out for the pleasures of the senses and searching to please ourselves, searching to do what we want. And we never think about changing ourselves. We always assume that we just have to stay in the same patterns. We try to keep all the comfort zones and all the things that we are afraid to lose because we're afraid to lose them. Why? Why do we stay the same and keep repeating the same mistakes and the same habits and the same boring old searching after pleasure and getting disappointed? Why do we keep doing the same thing although we could completely change ourselves? Why? It's because of ourself, this ego of myself, I am like that, and I want this, and I don't question that. I don't question this self. I don't question how it works. I don't question how it's made, how it's formed, or what are its consequences. I question nothing about it. We never consider the ability to change. And by the way, when I say ability to change, it doesn't mean like I will be able to learn to get up early in the morning even though I'm normally a night owl, or I can become better organized. And I'm not talking either about trying to reject everything about yourself and become somebody else. And it's definitely not only about changing one's external actions or habits, but basically about uprooting the cause of all problems within oneself, which means to uproot totally, remove completely any trace of greed or of hatred or of ignorance, delusion or laziness or carelessness or anything that causes us to do wrong. So when I say changing oneself, I'm talking changing it at this level, which is the only level that matters. But it amounts to essentially blowing up everything that constitutes what we think we are and what makes us who we are, because it means letting go of who we are, letting go of ourself. An interesting question to ask related to this is, if we have this potential, why don't we do it? Why do we mostly, on the other hand, pretty much stay the same throughout our entire lives and just repeating the same patterns and doing basically the same things in slightly different situations or with little modifications, but not really changing anything about ourselves? How come we stay the same if we have this ability to change at such a profound level? And the answer is, well, it's good to question ourselves about it, but basically the answer is this self, myself. We don't question that ever. We just look at what I wants, what I thinks, what I am. We might go as far as questioning who I am, or where have I come from, where am I going, what will I do next. But we never question the I. We always take I for granted and then ask questions later. So always I comes first, which means that I is sort of unchanging and always constant and permanent, and we make it fixed, and therefore we give it all these sort of, we assume all of these attributes and all these things that I has and all the things that I own and everything, that all my qualities, my problems, my characteristics, everything about it stays more or less fixed and never questioned. We never consider, never occurs to us to really question it. We might be kind of self-critical, for example, or self-judgmental, or have kind of hatred towards ourselves because of disliking how we behave or disliking aspects of ourselves, for example. But this is not the same thing as questioning ourselves and how it is made, and questioning what is it, where is it, which part of us is it. We never question how our mind works, or how our emotions are born, or why we do the things we do. Never. We're so interested in studying the world and studying the universe to the point where we're able to detect a solar flare from another solar system 90,000 light years away, but we know basically nothing about ourselves. For example, we all suffer. That's the most fundamental example. We all suffer, but how is suffering formed? How is it created? What's it based on? What's its food? And when we start to question ourselves about this, we realize we have all kinds of assumptions and all kinds of things we think about, for example, how suffering is formed, or why we suffer. Because he did that to me, or because this happened to me, for example. But without ever thinking about it, without ever actually questioning it. And when we do start questioning it, we realize that most of our assumptions are completely mistaken. But the problem is too that mostly, even when we approach Dhamma, when people approach learning Dhamma, we kind of tend to approach it as if it's another subject that we're learning about in a textbook that is to be sort of understood and studied out there as a concept or as an idea, or grasped as a theory. And theory is useful to point to us what to look for, but we have to study it within ourselves. That's the only place where we can actually look for it, actually study it. This is our university, our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, our body, our mind. And everything within them can be a subject of study. Every contact, every movement, everything we do we actually know how we do it? When we speak, do we know how we speak? What's causing us to speak? What's the nature of our speech? Do we know just when we're walking along the road and we turn right? How do we know when to turn right, for example? Anything can be a subject of study if we have learned where to look. Every point is a subject of study, but especially what we're interested in is the study of suffering. How is suffering formed within the mind? Once we start to question ourselves like this, then we will automatically start to realize just how malleable and how essentially unstable and unfixed our mind is. When we observe our own nature and question it far enough, then we can't help but stop to see ourselves as this sort of fixed self, and start to see it more like a machine made up of many different parts with workings and mechanisms that are complex, but that we can nonetheless get to know and understand. We can become the master of the machine, and that's how we start to learn to adapt it, to change it, to retrain it. Remembering, again, importantly, that the purpose of the training is always to remove greed, hatred, and ignorance. This can also be summed up by the phrase, don't trust the mind. Don't trust the mind. Don't take it at face value, whatever the mind brings. Don't take it for granted, whatever the mind brings. Anything. If you ask yourself, do you even really remember the taste of whatever you ate for lunch or whatever you ate for dinner? Do you hold that taste? Do you carry it with you? What did you eat? What can you tell me? You can only tell me a word, potatoes or carrots or something. But where is this carrot? Do you know about the carrot? Do you know the carrot or the yogurt or potato? No, you don't have the taste. So if you don't even have that, if you don't even know that, really, you can't hold that, then what is yourself? Where is all the ideas, what you have done, I understood this? Where is it? Where is your understanding? Where do you store it in you? Or I did this and that in the past, I'm planning to do that and that in the future. Where is it? What is it? So your whole self, whatever you name or call yourself by, is based on what finally? Where is it? When we understand this subject, we can realize that truly every minute we are free. We're already free. There's nothing binding us but our own mistake and our own misunderstanding. We can totally change. And where do we change and when do we change? It's right here, right now. We have the ability to change ourselves. It's not at some point in the future over a long, long process. It's only right here, right now. And if this were not the case, if we were not capable of this complete change, then Prince Siddhartha could never have become the Buddha. If he were the prince, if he were the Prince Siddhartha with all his responsibilities and all his princely knowledge and all his love for his wife and everything, if he were that, he should have stayed in the palace. Or he should have stayed with his first teacher, Alara, or he should have stayed with the second teacher, Udaka, and become the teacher of all of their students. Or he should have stayed then, later, as an ascetic with his 5 disciples. But see how many times he changed. He drops everything. And again, really, I'm not talking just about the external activities, because we can all say, oh yeah, me too, I change my external activities. I go traveling at some point and then I settle down at another point. But you don't change inside. You don't change yourself. You don't change your nature. That's why reflecting, remembering the Buddha and what he did was a subject that he advised people to think about. Not because you're depending on the Buddha as a kind of godly figure, or because you just want to feel inspired or practice some kind of devotion, but because if it's done correctly, then it can actually show you right here, right now, how you need to practice in order to uproot your own suffering and to remove your own defilements. If defilements like greed or desire or hatred were part of you as a sort of fixed part of your nature, then how could Prince Siddhartha have become the Buddha? How could he have uprooted them completely? How did he actually do that? And where could he learn it? Or if you were really suffering, as we all assume unthinkingly, because of something outside of us, then it would be impossible to be free from suffering. So when we think about the Buddha, we should not just think of him as a kind of inspirational figure, but really take him as our model and as our example, and ask ourselves how he went about doing what he did. And then we have to do it as well.